was a lot of self-hate, but the self-hate was so rooted in other people's opinion because in everything else, in other people's opinion that once again, it was people I had already outgrown. So like what, right? Like why? But that's, and my wife was always telling me that. But of course, why would you listen to the advice of the people closest to you? What do they know? That's the most ridiculous thing, right? But it was just years and years and years of bubbling that up. And I can't quantify it otherwise as self-hate, because otherwise I could give people advice, be like, you gotta love yourself. You gotta, I said it in my vows. And even then I'm still fighting for something more personally. It's like, why, dude? Like you literally just had 200 of the people that you love most at this fucking wedding. You know what I mean? But once again, it's, we get so focused on this amorphous thing that like ultimately doesn't matter. It's a great motivation tool, but eventually you got to look around and see how much better your life is. And once you do that, yeah, just let it go. So if you're there now, yeah, keep fighting, but like figure out what the hell's going to get rid of it, because it's the only person you're hurting is yourself. You're literally trying to impress people that don't matter to you.
KJ, welcome to Chase the Impossible.
Hey, what's going on? How are you? How are things? Well, you actually told me after, full transparency, you told me what was going on in your life about 10 minutes before this. But for the sake of the podcast, of course, how are you?
I am good. I think overall I'm good. I have been now with the app that I'm having. There's so many challenges, so I have been going through so many interesting experiences. Like one of them, actually, now I have a challenge where I have to be offline until 8 p.m. every day. So there's so many things that have come from that, and I think that many things
Interesting.
that are happening, which yeah, like it's very very interesting. We can dive into that as well. But it's been very interesting to go through those new experiences and kind of new challenges and kind of expanding that perceptions and you know, how are you?
I'm good, but you know what though? I'm not going to let you off the hook with that. We need to dig a little deeper, because actually what I find fascinating, and we can obviously get to talking about me and so on and so forth in my journey,
Yeah.
but what are you actually doing from that time up till 8 p.m.? Because I think people watching this, regardless of where you are in the world, we do work probably that normal 8 to 8 shift or 8 to 6 shift. What are you doing with your time?
The most interesting ones are weekends actually, because weekends are
Okay.
usually more free. So usually, and the other thing I started or like got back to after a break of, I was like a bit sick for a couple of weeks. I'm waking up early, so I'm up at like between 4 to 5 a.m. So I have
Wow. Okay.
time from like 5 until 8 p.m. where I'm pretty much no social media. Also, part of the rules is no gaming, no streaming, no movies, no YouTube, unless it's strictly kind of work related. Um, so really, the only thing that I have been using is LinkedIn, um,
Okay.
apart from last few days, um, and Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. Those
Okay.
are the only kind of places. So it's wherever I have the direct communication, but I haven't been like scrolling until 8. The first day was also no music. So literally complete silence.
Wow. So just in your own head. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. And it's been interesting because the first day, within first couple of minutes, I was like, oh, I want to put some music in the background. And I'm like, oh, nope.
Can't do it. Can't do
And
it.
there's like several realizations that I got from it. One of them was why it's been interesting. I probably will make a video on it because one was how, even when it comes to self development, we can become so distracted by consuming about self development from actually developing ourselves and doing the self development. Because there was
Yep,
this,
sure.
because there was this one day when I was on a walk and I wanted to, even like from consumption or like podcast consumption point, I'm usually listening only to the podcast that is within that app. So I'm not really listening any other podcasts where sometimes it wouldn't be necessarily like the most productive content. Um, so one day I was walking and I wanted to put on one of the episodes and my headphones weren't connected. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna continue
Wow.
walking.
You were able to
And
flip it that quick. Okay, cool.
yeah. And it's actually surprising how quickly it changes because I that was one thing where I noticed that even if I'm like en route somewhere or just like on a walk, even today I did like 45-minute walk. I didn't put anything on. I had headphones on, but I had nothing playing in them. I was just
Okay.
walking and that the other thing with that was I had this realization, oh, I missed thinking. Because there's no space to think. We distract ourselves, we consume stuff, we put something in the background. Simple thing,
Mm-hmm.
even as eating. A lot of times when we eat, there's something in the background. Now, nothing. So you're actually present. And I have realized that I have more thoughts and I'm more present. And it feels like I definitely can get more done because on weekends it's been interesting that there was this once, I think it was the first Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I went to city center. I did a bit of work from cafe. I went to sauna, and then it was around 4 p.m. And I'm like, oh, I want to go home and kind of chill. And I'm like, doing what? I can't do anything.
Yeah, that you're gonna
So
chill
I
and
was
just
like,
veg
okay,
out on your at home instead of maybe being
yeah,
active or like enjoying in nature or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
like I can't really watch anything because it's not 8 p.m. yet. I have another 4 hours.
right.
So that's where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go to another place and just do some work from there. Um, and and the other thing is, it's not that once I hit 8 p.m., I have a lot of time because I'm waking up at 5 p.m., 5 a.m. So there's not
Mm-hmm.
too much space for me to even like consume anything. And the first few days, I was like, okay, I need to consume and consume. It's kind of like you're catching up with everything.
Right.
And then afterwards, even yesterday, I realized after I got back from basketball and got back like 9:30 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I had some tasks to finish for work, so I did a bit of that. And then usually I would be like, oh, I want to kind of watch something to wind down or something. Um, I started to watch one video that one of my clients sent over. Very interesting video, by the way, about changing your identity. So interesting. And
Okay.
I ended up being like, you know what? I don't want to like watch anything. I'm just gonna go to sleep. It's kind of like whatever before would be short form content I can't really consume for a long time. Longer form, it really depends on what's the content. Where initially I would maybe watch something that is a bit more entertaining. Now I don't really
Mm-hmm.
even have like any cravings for that. So it's very, and I'm only 14 days in. Um, so it's been very, very interesting there. And the other thing I did, I started to notice how distracted I was. And I started to kind of apply it and think about other areas of life. Where am I overcomplicating things? How can I simplify things? And I started to look kind of like area after area and I started to cut things off and kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the most important thing for me to keep here? And what is it that is
Right.
kind of distraction or it's not really that necessary? And going through that also has been interesting because it's easier for our brain to add than to take away. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where initially my ego would be like, no, 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 we need that, we need that. And then the moment I make that decision, it's like, ooh, the weight has been lifted. Things gets more simple. I can be more present
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have to go through the loops in my head. So it's been very, very interesting for sure.
Well, that's the show. That's it. Well, this has been Chase the Impossible. That's literally how you unlock your
I haven't even
mindset.
asked you the
No, that's
first question I ask
it
everybody.
doesn't matter. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But that's actually awesome because like that's very much like what it like that's usually what it is for people who are like successful in general. Is like that's it. Like being learning to be very intentional with your time and then figuring out what's actually distracting you and omitting that in whatever way you can. And then what's really nice is that as you like age and then like life, life stuff happens, then kids start to fill that time and then so on and so forth. And then you start to remember, oh, there is something nice about spending way too much time playing a video game, right? But you do it in moderation. You don't do it every night, right? And then that's where like that's like the happy medium. So I'm very happy for your journey because I think that that was probably something you probably needed just for yourself. And it looks like you're thriving
Yes.
on it. So congratulations to you. That's awesome. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been very interesting and I have had challenge after challenge. There's so many challenges that I have done within that app where it's like it's very, very interesting. But I have the first question for you that I want to get to ask you.
Of course.
What is something that at some point felt impossible for you and now is your new normal?
Impossible for me, but is now my new normal. Um, I would say there's probably like an overarching like macro level view that I'll probably discuss here, but then I can get really specific on like drumming as well. Actually, I'll start with the specific and then I'll go back. I'm a
Mhm.
self-taught drummer. I've always loved rhythm gaming. Like growing up, I was in chorus. I was in an a cappella group, did all these different things, but I was never like classically trained in music in any way, shape, or form. I was just kind of someone who knew how to sing a little bit and enjoyed it. So me progressing to a point where I can now like all of that to say with a bunch of different stuff in between applying adult discipline, I can virtually listen to a song and play it just by
Mm.
hearing it, right? Applying all of the different things that I've learned. I wouldn't say that necessarily I thought it was impossible, but I did not think at 32 years old I was going to be able to be at a point where I could actually understand very like advanced techniques with drumming and realize, oh, I'd have to practice that, but I can figure that out. Like I think the only thing I really can't do at this point is like ridiculously fast, like Buddy Rich, like drum solo stuff and like blast beat death metal. Otherwise, everything else I can play. Think that's pretty good,
Mm.
right? So there's the specific. Overarching though, and I think this kind of ties into what success kind of looks like was, and we've talked about this before, is I didn't think I'd ever actually be able to get out of the bubble of my hometown. Really small town
Mm.
kid, stateside. All the typical Americanisms about small town people are usually generally true, and I was no exception to that. And what felt impossible to me was kind of getting out of that bubble, existing somewhere else, living in a different place, because my frame of reference was so skewed and I really didn't know better, right? I think the reality is there's just it's the difference of opinion is really ignorance more than anything else. Obviously some people just suck in general, but like that spans across the board no matter where you're from. Um, so I would say like as I progressed through life, went to college, met my wife, all of these different things and these different experiences exposed me to, oh wow, like this is different than what I thought my life was going to be like. And instead of kind of falling back into that like complacency, I went, well, what the hell? Why would I not just take a risk on these things? And it's worked out tenfold. I think meeting my wife and being able to commit to something like that, because my father was a womanizer, and like I saw emotional abuse happen all the time, so like naturally you'd think the misogyny would like follow me, and like sure I have a little bit of arrogance to me, duh, I'm a man, like obviously that happens, facetiously, right? But the reality was I needed to commit to, if I'm going to commit to the bit, I have to love myself first, and I have to be able to love myself for my flaws, and she loved me for my flaws, right? So that was something I hadn't experienced before. um and I was so young at the time to have that and like realize we could make that, and then just using that as kind of the leverage to excel in my career. And she pushed me very hard to do stuff like that. To where I just monetarily, I'm at a point where I would have never even considered. Just in general, law of elasticity from an economic perspective. Um, so yeah, I'm just really kind of circling the wagons at this point, but it's just more like, yeah, find a good partner, I think is number one for sure. After loving yourself, I think is really how you get there. But for the most part, I think what was really impossible was getting out of Clyde, New York. It doesn't happen very often to a lot of people, and I was kind of one of the few. I just didn't want to be a statistic. Yeah.
What changed where you act, or like what was initially what kept you stuck in that impossible, and what changed?
Um, it's very easy to um just fall into complacency. I know I've used that word a couple times, but the environment, because, and I think the reason that happens truthfully is because there's also a lot of redeeming qualities about a small community like that. Like parents kind of help other parents because we're in close proximity. There's really only a couple schools that you might go to, if not like one, right? So you kind of know where the kids are hanging out, where the bad kids hang out, where the drugs hang out, where you understand all of these like different things. So you kind of already have a really good understanding in like a macro view, even though it's so tiny. So because of that, it's very easy to fall back on, oh, I'm struggling. Oh, let me go to my friend's parents' house. Like that's something a lot of, places don't necessarily afford unless you live in the cul-de-sac, which once again, that goes down to systemic stuff and blah, blah. You get the idea, right? So I think because of that, until you hit an inflection point where honestly, I think it was where I started to realize my intelligence was starting to get to where the adults around me were. Because I had this like amorphous idea of what being an adult is. And it literally
Mm.
just means you're older. Like there's a difference between like being like mature and being an adult, right? And I think you can understand
Yeah.
that. And I think I was around like 15, 16, And, I'm starting to, mouth off a little bit. And I'm starting to get a little antsy. I mean, hey, that's just testosterone in boys, right? It just happens, right? It's just, but once I started actually applying intellect to these things, and then I started looking at like who I would have considered to be a mentor versus someone I wouldn't consider to be a mentor. And I was just like, it's like the Bowling for Soup song, High School Never Ends, right? I like started to notice that in life. And I think that was like the inflection point for me around my junior into senior year, where I started to realize like, can I make decisions on my own? I made some bad ones for sure. Um, but I think it was that and like the community, I'd outgrown the community to a point where I'm like, oh, this is never going to change. I'm also realizing like I was studying more. I was looking at things. I also had the benefit of the internet, right? Um, and I think it just exposed me to more that I was like, and I just got inquisitive, started getting combative, but it was cognitive dissonance to a degree that I was like, "You're an adult. Why are you thinking like a child?" And then that's where I was just kind of like, "Okay, yeah." So, um, I know, I talked out both ends of my mouth there about the community that I grew up in, but it's just that part of me I just wanted to break free, and a lot of us in my class did too. A lot of us don't really live at home anymore, which I found very interesting about our class, but it is what it is.
Uh, Outgrowing people. It's a big topic. It's something that I think I have found it interesting because I have gone through layers of it, and the most recent
Hmm.
one has been very interesting because the first kind of layer or level has been that it's pretty clear that you have outgrown the people and you don't align, where they
Hmm.
they have different lifestyle, they have different ambitions, different
Hmm.
interests, or they're just happy where they are and they just don't want to continue advancing, which is fine. um and that's where it's a bit more clear, okay, we don't align. And even though it's still kind of like a process to go through that, what I have now is kind of going through the process of outgrowing like-minded people, where you're still kind of aligned, but it
Hmm.
feels like if I am too close or too close proximity, now I'm starting to feel like I have to push brakes on myself, kind of thing. Um, and that's been like interesting to navigate because I feel like naturally I want to either distance myself, not necessarily isolate, since I know it's not a healthy it's not a
Yeah,
healthy
yeah, I'm
coping
with you.
mechanism. But it's very interesting to navigate that. Like one is outgrowing people where it's kind of clear that you're outgrowing them.
Hmm.
Um, but then the next one is also how do you navigate it when you start to outgrow the next group, because it kind of like it continues happening as you go through life. I'm
Hmm.
curious, what was your kind of first experience within your, and especially that like the place you were living, that's really all you have known your whole life. And now you start
Correct.
to outgrow those people and you don't have this clear path of, oh, this is the next person, this is the next place, this is the next. How did you navigate that?
I didn't do it well, and sometimes I still don't, candidly. The easy one, like you said, the low hanging fruit is like we don't align. I'm not really gonna help. We're not gonna be close. Like that's pretty much people I grew up with in high school. But it was super nice to go back and like see them at the reunion, right? So we were all
Yes.
like very coming back. But it's at the end of the day, like I'm not reaching out to them, I'm not calling them, so on and so forth. Those have been the people I've met in college and beyond. So that was easy. I think what has helped me truthfully, and I don't necessarily advocate this practice, but I feel like you kind of have to deal with the adversity of doing too much in order to get there. I think what happens is that when you make big life moves, whether that's moving to a new city, whether that's getting married, whether that's having children, um, they are going to just take so much of your time that you're going to find people in those like lanes of life that just don't really contribute at all,
Yeah.
even if you're like-minded, right? And I think that's and I've started to notice this where I get along more with the old heads. Why? Because they got kids. Some of them even have kids like close to my age, right? And I love playing in that world because that's kind of like home, right? Like I'm used to stuff like that. Um, but as a result, I spend more time kind of committing to get to know those people versus I might have some like-minded individuals, but like here's a great example. Like, there's a BDR that I'm coaching at Salesforce right now. It's purely work related. Now he could text me and we could shoot the shit, but like I'm not going to be committing more time to like building a friendship with him because it's doing so well, like the work perspective. But I could talk to any of my peers that have children, and we're probably going to be able to have more friendly conversations. We're going to be able, because we're just at that phase in life. So I think when we come into like these people, like being intentional with your time is there, but I almost feel like you have to put yourself in other situations in order for you to figure out who to omit. Because like it's sometimes tough that if you have all this time to commit to communicating with people, you may not necessarily realize their ulterior motive. Because I don't know about you, but like I very much lead with empathy. I very much like I'll talk to anyone, right? No big deal. I also just feel like people are generally good, and sometimes that's not the case. My wife likes to remind me of that all the time, right? So like that's what I'm saying. I'm not great at this, but because I've filled my life with its stuff now, I like my time is very dedicated, and my free time is with the kids and the family. So because of that, if you're not about that or supporting that, well then screw you, right? Easy to do, but that's because for me, I needed to fill the space so I could figure out how to omit the rest. Yeah. I don't know if that's great advice, but that's what worked for me and that's how I've done it. Yeah.
That's really what it's about. It's kind of like what worked for you, because different people
Hmm.
find different solutions. I know that for me, I have had people that tell me that they like this approach of like cutting people off, and I'm like,
I
I'm
hate
not
that. I don't
necessarily
like
that
that either.
person.
No,
I
you can
don't.
do it when there's a reason to be presented to cut off, but until then, it's like, why would you hard
Yeah.
stop it for no reason?
Um,
Yeah.
what I have seen, and I actually like. I think I started to have the first glimpse of outgrowing people when I did. I don't know how many years ago it was. Probably like 4 or 5 years ago. Out of nowhere, at the like at the New Year's, we all do reflections and everything. And I had this idea to kind of go through my friendships. And I ended up calling it
Okay.
like relationship audit.
Sure. Okay.
I would just kind of go through the relationships that I have that I would find important or valuable. And I started to notice a pattern that the give take ratio was way off. I was the giver majority of the time. And for the most part, they were takers because I was so used to being the giver, and I didn't really experience too much in like friendships growing up, the receiving part. I was just like, whenever I would get any crumbles, I would be like, oh my gosh, they're such a good friend. They helped me with this like one thing. And I started to notice just by kind of putting it on paper and putting it in front of me that, oh, this is like way off. Or I would always be the one that initiates meeting up, and we
Hmm.
would meet up wherever it's convenient for the person. And like, I'm not blaming them because I was also enabling it by
Oh
being
yeah,
a people pleaser.
which is
So
good.
there's that.
Good, good self awareness. Nice job.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that it's them per se. Um, but because it also was me being like, oh, I don't really deserve help. I just have to be helper. I have to be the fixer. Like
Yeah.
that's what I learned about friendships growing up. And that's where like when I started to notice those patterns, I was like, whoa. And I had this experiment where I was like, okay, next 3 6 months, let's not initiate contact and see what happens.
Probably
I
none of
heard
them reach out.
back almost, I don't remember who I did hear back from, but majority of it, it was me just becoming aware that I'm the one that keeps the relationship
Cursory.
alive.
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to an extent. It's not like you want to keep the score in the friendships or relationships, but at the same
Hmm.
time, you start to see how much people actually care. And I think in
Hmm.
general, I think nowadays so many friendships, relationships have become so transactional, or it's like what's in it for me, or we get too
Hmm.
kind of ego driven. And that's been like interesting to just see that. And with overgrowing people, what I do is initially I would go through I kind of have the space so that I can kind of think or observe. But then I also not a lot of times, but depending on the relationships, I will go through the grief process. And I remember
Oh,
I would,
interesting. Okay.
yeah, because I would reflect on, especially I would be confused. Why am I kind of grieving or going through some kind of like sadness if on paper this relationship doesn't give me anything? It's not like I'm receiving, and a
Hmm.
lot of times I would even feel drained. And then when I reflected on it, I realized I remember I was on a walk one day and I had this like light bulb moment. where I was like, oh, what I'm grieving is the potential of it, what it
Yeah,
could
the
be.
idea of something. Correct. Yes.
Because I see the potential, I know the potential, but it's not
Hmm.
there. Um, and and I don't know if it can ever get there because those people might not be able to catch up, or I might not be able to kind of align with them, and we never know if we ever gonna align like
Correct.
fully. And it's kind of like just going through that grief process of like, that's what I'm grieving is the potential of it, not what
Hmm.
it's right now, but what the like what's the potential of it. And that's when I usually go through like that process where I just allow myself to feel whatever comes up, and I'm like, okay, this is the process that I need to go through. um I know that it's the right kind of decision or the path for me. And I also don't go with it with the mindset of well, one mindset is cutting people off, but also like, oh, like we will never be aligned. And I'm like, I don't know. I can't predict future. Maybe down the line we actually are like perfectly aligned. But it's just like that acceptance that yeah, not everything is there to stay, and it's completely fine to outgrow people. But it is knowing that doesn't make it easier to go through that.
What you've just described is what plagues a lot of relationships, like
Yeah.
romantic ones, is I think people fall in love with the idea of someone,
Yeah.
the potential of someone. And when going gets tough or life changes, right? It happens all the time when kids happen, right? There's a level of selfishness that you can't necessarily get rid of. And I think, and candidly, like the amount of mental fortitude it actually takes to not want to just throw your children through a wall is like it's unreal. Like I'm saying that facetiously. I would never actually hurt my children, but like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have such visceral reactions. But if you're having the visceral reaction, that means you wanted to have the kid. I think sometimes people get frustrated because they're just like, oh, like you're bothering me. It's like, no, I just want you to like there's a difference in that mindset because then I think what happens is all of that anger gets directed at the other person because you didn't actually love the person. You love the idea of what you thought they were going to be, and you're frustrated because they're not doing what you thought, right? And it's just one of those like when that eye opening happens, I wish more people would just like stop having babies, like chill out, make sure you actually like understand what you're doing. But I think you can take a microcosm of that and apply that to any relationship, just like you have, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of it also is the self-awareness is huge. And I
Oh, you
think
have
a
to love
lot of
yourself first.
times
Have to.
one is self-love, but also self-awareness of, oh, I'm responsible for this shit that I just said.
Hmm.
Like it's not
Hmm.
your fault that you triggered me and I responded, because a lot of times you want to blame the other person. It's like, and I have had this like, I find it very interesting with triggers, because it's, I don't think anybody is trigger proof. I'm working towards it, but I'm not there.
It's impossible. You think like you can be as you can have that level of narcissism where you're like, I'm not affected by anything, but you will get baited. It will happen. It's just
I
if you have
think
emotions, of course.
I don't think about it from kind of narcissist perspective. It's more so that you're so aware that, let's say, like an example, somebody says something to me that kind of makes me feel hurt. So instead of now projecting it on them or feeling, assuming it's not intentional, sometimes people want to hurt you, but even then, like you can get to the point where even that doesn't affect you. So I look at it as the kind of the levels of awareness that you can have where, let's say now I'm at the place, it depends of course on the person that I'm talking to, because some people they're not in a place where I can discuss it with them. Where let's say somebody says something that triggers me and I will say like, hold up, whatever what you just said triggered something in me, and I'm trying to understand what it is. Usually I try to kind of go within and explore a bit. And then from that, a lot of times I will get some insights or something that I can learn about myself, where I look at triggers as opportunities or kind of like a gift that I unwrap on, like, what do I need to work on now kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, Whereas before I would feel like, oh, this person is like being mean to me, or and I have had some people that tell me the truth like straight in my face because they care. Not with like bad intentions, but
Yeah.
they care so much that
Hmm.
they will tell me exactly what I need to hear. And it doesn't feel good. And there's been times that it makes me cry, but I'm aware enough to be like, but that's true. And that's where like it's, I think in general it's about those in in relationships, especially the intimate relationships, that's where you're the most exposed, that's where you're the most
Oh
vulnerable.
yeah.
And how do you navigate your triggers in relationship?
Well, in like my romantic one. Oh, also horribly. Uh, no, it's not horrible. We're happily married. Been married almost what 7 years. Got married
Oh,
20. I don't
nice.
even know at this point. Yeah, been married for 32-year-olds. We've been married forever. We've been together forever. I think what it is that you we've learned to once we stopped drinking so heavily and had the children, honestly, because when you're just drugged up to 20, young something, you're still growing up together, right? Just it's the way it is. I think what we've learned to do is actually give ourselves some grace in the moments. We're allowed to be frustrated in the moment, but
Hmm.
we're going to give ourselves some grace to like turn it around. Like even this morning, fantastic example of this, right? We just got a brand new puppy. I'm not used to having a
Oh.
puppy. I also like I haven't been getting up and working out like I wanted to. Like so like this week I'm like cool, I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to get back up and go do something. So I wake up early, dog takes a piss on the floor and I clean that up. My son wakes up, just all this shit's kind of happening around me. So
Mhm.
now I'm just being an asshole, right? Like I'm just being like just like what? Like I'm not yelling, I'm just like right?
Yeah.
And Jen is trying to like help me and I'm just omitting the advice and blah blah blah. I go on the walk, I come back, we apologize. It's like, hey, look, I was doing this. And then it's always a nice little quick jab, like, hey, we know, by the way, this is what I need from you. Yes, cool. And we've accepted like that's how it works. And then it's just water under the bridge at that point, right? So I think what happens is that sometimes people bottle that up and then they try to have this conversation, but like you've bottled some shit up so much that you can't really get it out. And then that's where the screaming matches happen and so on and so forth. So I think what we just learned was give grace, forgive early, have the conversation, right? And if it's stemming to something deeper, get ahead of that.
Mhm.
That's probably why I'm not a drunk right now. She was starting to realize that it was when I lost my job and I never really like stopped that per se. And then she did it under the guise of dry January, but she's like, why don't you just try not drinking through the end of December? And then she's like, try doing that through January, right? And she was like, you can go drink when you're at bowling, but like we're not gonna buy it at the house and whatever. And those were those quick little conversations where in the moment I was frustrated, but then I was like, you know what, she's right. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? Now we don't even buy it at the house. It's not even a problem, right? Like I now hate when I drink like 5, 6 beers because I can because I'm Irish, but like literally, dude, I have the worst headaches afterwards, right? So it sucks. So I feel
Mm.
bad, and it can't really be there. So it's just one of those like early and often conversations. And I think people say that and I think it makes sense. But once again, it stems back to do you have the self awareness to know you have the flaw? And you're not necessarily going to be able to curb that trigger, but how do you deal with it? How do you cope with it? How do you work on that? So that's what we do, and that's been more recent. I would say that's probably past year or two, in terms of how well that's been. But when I tell you the last time we've had a screaming match has been years, it's true, right? Because we can handle these things. Um, so yeah, that's really what it is. But once again, that works for us. Just communicate early and often. We're very sarcastic with each other, so we use that as our humor. That's our kind of coping mechanism for the daddy issues that we both have. And yeah, that's really it. But once again, that's been communicated. It's out in the open, and that's what it is. So yeah, hashtag communication is really the how
Yeah,
you deal with
that's
that.
what I literally was about to say, that communication is something that I literally, on Wisdom and Action, I had, and actually also here, I had communication expert, and like communication is, I find it fascinating because it's like that's something we do every single day. Yet, I don't think it's something that we have like really intentionally worked on or learned. Um, but it's something that is a skill set that you can literally have two people with very good intentions not have that skill set at good enough level where now there's like drama, there's
Hmm.
chaos, there's pain and there's hurt, and nothing really gets communicated at the end of the day
Yep.
because you don't say that I'm hurt, you attack the person or
Yep.
do whatever is your kind of way with deling with it.
Which is
um
the giving the grace. Yep. Like give the grace. Like, okay, that was out of nowhere. The fuck is that?
yeah.
Let's try again.
And I think big part of it in that also is the ownership, taking ownership of like your
Of course.
behavior and your reaction. And that's a that's something that I think, I had a lady on my podcast, we were talking about it because she said that one of her challenges or like hard things to learn was to actually take ownership, because she was used to, like, she said she was kind of like spoiled as a kid. So she didn't really learn the concept of consequences, or like taking responsibility and those things. And then when you go out in life, and it's not that you just like raise your voice and you get what you want,
Hmm.
that's where you start to learn those lessons. And it's
Yeah.
it's not an easy lesson to learn. And I think the hardest thing about it is that you can't really blame anybody but
But
yourself.
you, because at the end of the day, regardless of the fact that you always had a choice.
Yeah.
And but it's also too, like, as a parent, I can understand where, like, you accidentally spoil your child, and that's why we've been very intentional. Like, we don't really, timeout doesn't really work for them because they're too young, but taking
Mhm.
away things does.
Mm.
Right? But once again, it's, I'm not trying to say like, "Oh, I'm a better parent," blah, 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 whatever,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
just that mentality of just, like, how do you actually, like, shape yourself and, like, prepare for it, is you kinda have to have accountability. So, like, if you're I don't know, just like you did it to yourself. You're saying, "I'm not touching devices until 8." It's kind of your own punishment, a consequence of the actions you've been taking at this point, right? It's like you're applying that. So I think it's really cool. But it's exactly right. Like, um, yeah, you have to learn to hold yourself accountable. And I'm not saying you need to solve it in that moment either. That's really difficult because that's usually deeper. It's learned behaviors. There's neurology studies on that shit, right? Like, but recognizing that you are potentially part of the problem is just as good as solving it. To be honest.
Yeah, I even think that, like, as you were talking, my I had this thought that a lot of times with the, especially when you start to become aware of kind of your contribution, a lot of times one big thing that can happen is you start to kind of beat yourself up for that, or you start to
Sure.
like be negative towards yourself, and not really, compassion is the last thing you think of a lot of times.
Hmm.
Um but that's like one of the things that I have learned when it comes to the really like growth in general. Especially I have seen this with like high performers, that a lot of times it comes from this place of like self-hate, where it's like, I don't like where I am, I don't like who I am, and so I need to go and achieve this so that, um I don't know, it's not, the intention isn't always self-love, it's just coming from place of like, I just hate where I am or
That's
who I am.
literally that's the start of my career. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
How is that?
Once again, I'm glad I have Jenna. I'm glad I have my
Mm,
wife, to be honest with you. Like, it was, I will say it was probably the best motivation I could have to try and prove something of myself.
yeah, it works.
It works, but at a certain point, you got to cut that out and you gotta whatever. And it was actually when I got fired from UiPath, was that moment of, all right, you got to get rid of the chip on your shoulder. And then it was officially kind of starting to dissipate for sure when I got the job in Salesforce, because I was like, oh, I was like, that's a milestone. You made it. You did it. And that's where I started to let all of that go.
Mhm.
But candidly, yeah, it was a lot of self-hate. But the self-hate was so rooted in other people's opinion.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
in everything else, in other people's opinion, that once again, it's such a full circle moment of this conversation. It was people I had already outgrown. So, like, what, right? Like,
Ironic.
why? Ironic, right? Don't you think? It's like rain, right? But like, it's but that's, and my wife was always telling me that. But of course, why would you listen to the advice of the people closest to you? What do they know? That's the
Yeah,
most
yeah.
ridiculous thing, right? But
Mhm.
it was just years and years and years of bubbling that up, and it's, I can't quantify it otherwise as self hate, because otherwise I could give people advice, be like, you gotta love yourself. You gotta. I said it in my vows, and even then, I'm still fighting for something more personally. It's like, why, dude? Like, you literally just had 200 of the people that you love most at this fucking wedding. You know what I mean? But once again, it's, we get so focused on this amorphous thing that, like, ultimately doesn't matter. It's a great motivation tool, but eventually you got to look around and see how much better your life is. And once you do that, yeah, just let it go. So if you're there now, yeah, keep fighting, but like, figure out what the hell's going to get rid of it, because it's the only person you're hurting is yourself. You're literally trying to impress people that don't matter to you.
Yeah, I had something similar where for me, I think it was more so shame, that was
Sure.
driving me. That's where I started when I was like, I don't know, 10, 12 years old. I would wake up at 5 a.m., do my own workouts throughout the year.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter what's the weather because I was like, oh, I'm not good enough with basketball. I need to like work extra. And
Sure.
it worked. I have no regrets about that time, but I know that I was feeling miserable. I was anxious. I was
Hmm.
insecure. There was so
Even
much
though
like
you were
body
becoming a
shame.
stud, like even though you're becoming an
Exactly.
absolute stud at the game, didn't matter.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's that ridiculous.
Yeah. I literally like I got to the point where I I got to like tryouts for the national team and I was like very good. I probably was like top 5 in the country players and but the problem was it was the self-esteem and self-worth. I remember going to that practice and I didn't even try in that practice because I was like, well, what's the point of trying if I'm not gonna get in anyways? That was literally my thinking
But
process.
you made it to like you were invited to the like that's what I'm saying is it's so fascinating that you were operating at such a high level that you
I
still
did
were like,
not
oh
see
well,
that.
these people were better. I was like that crazy. I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously you've gotten through it now, but like,
Yeah,
damn,
it's
that's
a learn
crazy.
it's something that like when I was reflecting on it, I was like, how many more glass ceilings do I have? Even now that it's been 10 years since I played and I got back to like playing again. I'm not
Yeah.
anxious. I'm like emotionally I'm the most stable that I have been. Um and that's where I was like, "Oh, I'm actually good." Like
So I
I
felt with
literally
bowling when
like
I picked that back up. Yeah, the same
yeah,
deal.
like
Yeah.
it's been very interesting to go through that and to kind of reflect and see that there was this interesting I don't remember where I heard about it. But there was this question of like if you had like another alternative life that you live, what would you have done or who you could have been kind of thing?
Hmm.
And I was like, I'm curious what would have happened if I had more confidence in the basketball? What would have that life been like? Kind of just not looking back with like regrets or anything. I have no regrets.
Sure.
But it was more so like even reflecting on what other lives could I live in like another kind of dimension or whatever.
I'm with you.
Yeah. What would be yours?
Honestly, I think what it would have been is I think if I would have doubled down on the music thing,
Mm,
knowing what I know now and how actually like musically inclined I am, I think it would have been really cool to pursue an actual like creative life, like really
mhm,
committing to trying to get to Nashville or really committing to doing some stuff online and whatever. Because I think if I would have applied the same work ethic that I have for my W2 gig, I think I could have probably succeeded at it. Um, I don't want to now. People are like, "Why don't you like produce music?" I'm like, "I'd much rather learn a song, sit in the pocket, or like learn chords and play the melody with my kids." You know what I mean? Like, that's where it taps out for me now. But you remove the kids, maybe Jenna's just a hangs out with the band and whatnot. Like, I could totally see that being something we could do because we go to shows all the time. Like, we're going to work for
mhm,
in June, right? So, um, but you get the idea. Yeah, I think that's what it would be for me is what would the creative life have been? Because I have an ability to be creative.
mhm.
Um, but yeah, I let that ship sail once I said, I'm gonna go work at Ernst and Young and be a technology management consultant. And that's that's where my career started. I love it now. Trust me, don't get me wrong. Anyone saying
Yeah,
that, like
exactly.
hearing that. So as a solutions engineer, I love the gig. But yeah, that's very vastly different than, being a struggling, performer in New York.
How would you I'm curious, how would you define creativity?
I think it's anything that steps you out of your comfort zone. Truthfully,
Huh.
like something that allows you to like I don't think creativity means you have to be a painter, or have to be a good writer, or have to be whatever. I think creativity is just being able to apply another perspective to something, truthfully.
Mm,
Because I the creativity, like just as an example with that, like in solutions engineering, it's pretty cut and dry. Like obviously the creativity and that's the art of sales, and maybe I'm exposing too much about software sales, but the reality is all you're doing is trying to position your product in the best way so the customer feels confident in a purchase. That's all selling is. So the creativity in that motion could be, we know you need this product, but why don't we actually help you with this little part of our solution instead to help you understand why this is important, right? It's a little creative because the normal natural thing is, oh, this is what good looks like. Here's all the industry benchmarks that tell you.
yeah.
But the creativity is, hey, well, I know this is your problem and we can solve that. It's not the right way to do it, but why don't we get you there so we can earn the ROI behind it so you can actually substantiate the proper purchase, right? So like that's where I would even consider creativity. And that's such an easy little thing, but that's very different than if then else in an otherwise, format. So that's how I define creativity. And then obviously people have different flavors and perspectives on that, but um, I think it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it's something that I remember when I was younger. I was like, "Oh, I'm not creative. I'm not creative," because that's the association I would have. It's like I'm not really like
Arts.
in
People do
arts or
that all
anything
the
like that.
time, right?
Yeah, and I don't remember what was the definition, or I just read somewhere somebody was. I think it was a book. Where there was mentioned something about creativity. And one of my clients actually, she was like, "Oh, like just do your thing. You're the creative one." And I'm like, "Huh? Me? What?" It's
You
kind of
are.
like what? And that's where I started and it's that's actually an interesting topic that I want to touch on is
Sure.
learning about learning about ourselves from perspective of, oh, I think I know who I am, I know what I'm about, and all those things. Literally, good example is I have been in self development since I was like 12 years old. So I'm, especially like very early on, I would annoy people with questions. Um, and because I was very curious about me. And
Sure. I
whenever
get
I
it.
read, whenever I read the book, there's a question and I'm like, okay, I can ask it to people. And there was this very interesting question. How do you see me? And, and I would send it out to people. I would ask them and I would tell them like all the good, all the bad, like just, I'm curious to know. One friend responded very interestingly. She was like, "What do you care what people think about you?" And I'm like, "That's not what it's about. I want to see myself from different perspectives."
Hmm.
Um, but even that perspective was interesting, kind of to see where she went with that
Hmm.
question. But one of the friends wrote something along the lines of, "I see you as a leader," and I was like,
Hmm.
and I probably was around 18 years old then, and it really like I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, me? I literally was thinking about it for like 2 weeks. I'm like, "Maybe,
Hmm.
no, but no." And I was like kind of going through that process, and
Something
it's
my
been
manager said to me is still in my head from last
which
week. Yeah, I get it. Yep.
which that your leader?
Oh, uh, she's my leader. Yeah, my people leader.
Okay.
Yeah, we were having a conversation before I was heading out, and naturally I wasn't sober. So I was like thinking about it a little more. I'm like, oh, that's a good impression. There you go. But yeah, it's same type of deal. Like I'll noodle on something for a while that someone said that like I didn't quite get. Yeah, so I'm with you. Continue. Sorry, just wanted to corroborate.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about it is that one is other people, but also it can be information that you learn, and also it can be life where you learn kind of it's something that that video that I told you about the identity
Hmm.
and changing identity. Uh, Interesting point there that he said was that by the time we're 25, it's like our brain is has decided that, oh, I learned all that I need to learn. Like this is the way you are, and that's why a lot of people don't change after like
Hmm.
25. Um, and I find it fascinating that we assume we know ourselves or what we're about or what we can't do, um, to the point where we don't even question it. And it can be some very outdated software within our brains
Hmm.
about some belief that like our grandparents instilled in us about us.
Because they said it to you when you were like 6. Like some
Exactly.
random. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yep. Yep.
What are some of the things that uh, I will explain the question. I had a friend of mine tell me uh, something along the lines when I would say like, I don't think I'm a runner. I don't think I can run long distances, and that was like strong belief for me. Now I actually have finished like 4 half marathons and a marathon, which is like proves it not to be true. Um, but he said that the concept he was talking about is proving yourself wrong, and the
Okay.
question would be, what are some of the things that you were wrong about yourself that you learned over time that they were not true?
Um. Actually, here's one. And it sounds very self-fulfilling, but I know it's true. I've always had certain people in my life, even those close to me, and it's actually usually came from people who were closer to me, tell me I need to have humility. Okay. Like I said, I know this is going to sound very self-serving, but you invited me on the podcast for a reason. So I think
Yeah.
this is corroborated. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I found a lot of times when I was hearing that feedback or hearing that guidance, it was very much rooted in the scenario that we were discussing, in what their already given perception of me was, instead of how I'm operating today. So like a lot of like a great example, like my dad, he hasn't really been in sales in a long time. And every time we get to some sort of discussion, he'd always try to make it like, oh, this is about me. I taught you what you know, blah, 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 and all these different things. And he'd say, you got to have a level of humility coming from the dude who has literally zero of it trying to tell me that, right? You know what I mean? And then I would hear it from other members, or I've heard like even from family where like some scenario was happening in their life or so on and so forth, or friends, or whatever. Or maybe it came from someone who was intimidated by me in like a work capacity,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But it was few and far between, right? Because then when I would meet other people, they kind of liked the fact that I'm kind of off the cuff and very direct and very sincere, but I'm very succinct and I have experiences and evidence to back up any claim that I'm going to make, right? So it's one of those scenarios where I thought maybe I was a little more arrogant. And I think I just kind of sometimes say that in the humor and the way that I interact with people, right? And I like to, like, people have called me like the lovable asshole and so on and so forth, which I think is actually a very true moniker for me, like
It's a
personality
cute
wise.
name.
Right, it's a cute name, right? But when you meet me, you understand that. You're like, okay, he
Yeah.
can be very direct, but otherwise he's gonna be super nice to you. And it's true. Like I am generally very nice. Like I am kind. I do care. Like unless you give me a reason to not like you, I'm gonna lead with that, right? But I found that that's also very intimidating to very type A people,
Mm.
or intimidating to people who can look at that, because I truthfully, you can put me in any place on this planet and I probably, if I can at least communicate in some way, shape, or form, I'm probably going to be liked. And that's the way I've always been. And I didn't do it other than just really being myself. I'm like, hey, we're humans on this world, like I'm going to do it. I'm never going to necessarily be so extroverted to the point that I'm going to insert myself in a conversation. So that's what I mean is I channel from all of these different things. So when I started to realize, like, why were people telling me that, it's because their perception of me was wrong in terms of how I interact with certain things based on the way I might have been in the past. Like there's no way that you get to the level of competence and salary expectation and all of these different things that allow me to live the life that take care of my family if I was an asshole. You just can't do it because I'm not running my own business. I'm not a venture capitalist. I graduated with like hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, right? Like there's no possible way I could have been the elitist of the world and got here. And once I realized that, I realized their feedback was coming from a place of almost projection.
Yeah.
That was really tough. And I know that sounds so conceited, but I'm looking at the levies and I'm saying,
I don't
how
think it
many people
does.
actually have said that to me versus all of the actual people that I could give a call to and have an effective conversation with? You know what I mean? So it's just one of those, like, it was very fascinating to me that I learned. I was like, am I arrogant? Or have I just heard that from people where it pierced enough to the point that I believed it? So that's,
There's quite a few that I can talk on here because I find it fascinating. One is, where do I start? One that you said about being direct. I feel like many people assume that if you're direct, you're not kind. They're
yeah,
they're not the opposites. You can be
no,
direct because you care, and
correct. That's how I
and
feel
I
about it.
exactly, and I think it's not even you being that way. It's not even how people perceive you. It's how people perceive kindness. What's their perception of
Hmm.
kindness? What's their perception of being humble? Because um, I literally listened this podcast where like he said it so brilliantly about being humble that everybody's like, oh, be humble, be humble. Where people think that you being humble means you have to think less of yourself. But it's like the same thing with arrogance versus confidence. Arrogance
Hmm.
is when you talk shit and you can't back it up. Confidence, you actually can back it up.
Yeah.
You have proof. And that's where like I think a lot of times people kind of jump to those conclusions because they actually one is they probably are intimidated. They don't have that level of confidence
It's
or
usually that's what I've
skill or
landed on.
competence. Yeah. And what he said about humility was humility is not thinking less of you, it's thinking more of others.
Hmm.
Because a lot of times the message is, oh, you have to be humble, be more humble, don't be too like too braggy or whatever. And it's like, what's wrong with that? If it's also something that is kind of like part of your personality and you're not putting it in people's faces per se. That's not kind
Yeah.
of the approach that you would have. um and and that's why, like, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, where I think you kind of like answered it with what you shared, what kind of what's the opposite of humility, which it sounds like it's arrogance. But
Maybe I didn't know what word to say, but you know where I'm
yeah,
going,
yeah,
obviously. Yeah.
yeah, and like it's just something that I find very interesting, how different we perceive certain words or certain definitions, and that perception of, I think they were talking like, um what Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Nobody will
I lo-
call him humble, right?
Not at all. Not at all. But honestly, you know what he only talks really good about? Wrestling or fighting.
Yeah,
He doesn't do that with
but
anything else.
for you to get to the skill level that he has, you have to be humble. You have to be coachable.
Of course, there's no way people just show up and magically, become dominant in that field. Exactly. Correct.
Yeah,
That's
and that's
exactly
where,
right.
like, he just knows where to tune it up, um, or kind of have the show going on. But you have to have that, especially if you want to accomplish big things. You have to have that confidence, or you have to build that confidence to the level where you are certain about your ability, especially when you are surrounded with people that keep questioning you or keep telling you like, "Oh, I don't think like, when will be enough for you," kind of thing. Um, and that's where, like, I think it's something that I find it very interesting to see how others perceive it or how they look at confidence, and
Hmm.
even like being direct versus kind. That's a big one. I probably wouldn't have understood it fully until I experienced somebody being very direct to me, to the point where it hurt. But that's where I actually started to grow.
Yeah.
Because I had somebody that cared enough to tell me the truth. And if you think about it, it's one of the most selfless things you can do, because you're telling somebody something that they need to hear, and you're potentially risking relationship with them because you don't know how they're going to respond. They might look at you as being an asshole, where
Hmm.
all you do is you just want to help them. But you know that if you just tiptoe around the problem, you're not actually helping them, you're
Correct.
enabling them.
Right. Which is not kind. That's
Yeah.
being right. And there's a difference between being kind and being nice.
Yes, I was about to say
Being nice is the
that.
latter. The former is what happened to you. Someone was actually being kind and saying, "Hey, I know you're not going to like it in this moment. It's unsolicited feedback, but I guarantee you're going to grow as a result." That is so much better. But once again, I think that goes back to outgrowing people and like 25. Like your frontal lobe stops. You're like, "I'm good. I don't need to do anything
Yeah.
else." I think there's just varying levels of empathy. I really think all cognitive dissonance
Mm,
comes down to that, right? It's just how empathetic are you willing to be, or are you just complacent in the way your life is because it's worked out for you, right? And I think that's where a lot of tension happens. It's not that people are generally bad. It's just more, I would probably venture to guess we're more open. Like we see people walking down the street, we're willing to hold the door open for them. We're willing to say hi. We're willing to, whatever. But that's just experiences compounded over and over and over again. Where some people, like not in a bad way, right? But like my wife is very like introverted and won't necessarily want to reach out and care. But she's also grown with us and she's raising a family, right? So like there's other ways that you can achieve this level of empathy. I'm just using those examples, just there. Um, but I think that's all it is. Yeah.
yeah, and being empathetic and being patient, it's harder than not being that.
Yeah.
And that's that ego, wanting to be right and not wanting to have your ego hurt, especially when you're not aware of your ego. It can cause a lot of damage.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on which is the main topic that we could talk about,
Yeah.
the entrepreneurial lifestyle
Oh
versus,
yeah, and yeah, the thing we should end on. So yeah, so we can get yeah, yes, the thing
literally
we
the
should
thing that
actually get
we
to.
thought that we wanted to talk about. We're
Right, right, right,
finally
right.
touching on it. can you talk on your experience? Because I think it's something that nowadays everybody's talking about, like, oh, you need to build your business. That's the way to go, and everybody needs to do that, to the point where many people feel the pressure to build something, or they might even feel less than if they don't.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk through kind of your approach to that, or your lifestyle or decisions when it comes to that?
I honestly kind of love that we contextualize really who we are and how we think, because I think that's very important to going down this actual path for sure. You had actually posted about it. Rest in peace, your LinkedIn. Hopefully, you get it back at some point. But you actually made a poll on something like this, and I actually think it's very insightful. Is like if I was going to reach out, I was going to name the show. What would I name it? And what would you want to talk about? And why would you how would you market yourself? And what are some things? And I think mindset is always going to be everything, because the mindset is going to allow you to figure out where you fit in the market.
Mm,
Okay. And I think what that means is everyone says, oh, I want to work for myself. That's true. But if you don't have a tangible skill that you can sell, apply those skills internally, right? And what does that really come down to, right? We literally just had a whole discussion on it. Like, what would your alternative path be? Would have loved to have been a rock star. Would have loved to have gone down that path, and I would have done it. That would have been needing to me at the time, being entrepreneurial in spirit, committing to the bit, and so on and so forth. And it would have changed my whole perspective. But what were some of the things that I liked about playing music? Well, I liked being able to practice a song and not be able to do it and then do it. That's achieving something. It's gamification. There are portions of that that allow me to get that entrepreneurial spirit out. And I think that's what you need to focus on more is, do you even have the ability to do it? Because if you don't, apply those things in the way that I'm doing it instead. So when I look at building a brand and building a business, my brand is on LinkedIn. You know who I am when you go to my profile. I've got bowling videos, I've got podcast videos, I've got commentary on a bunch of different posts, whether it spans from financial guidance to obviously sales engineering to what software does. And you get a full picture of who I am. All I did was use my LinkedIn as a way to just blow that up a little bit, right? That has afforded me the luxury of getting paid more in my jobs and allowing me the creativity inside of the roles to, like, just now, like literally as I'm on this podcast, I noticed there was a gap in our packaging, right? That we are giving to sales reps. And I'm like, I think that's a problem. So I'm literally cycling my manager to figure out where I should post that, right? That's
yeah,
entrepreneurial in spirit, right? I'm doing something that's not part of my job description. I could say it's not whatever. So
yeah,
learning
being
to
proactive.
apply, right, just being proactive. I think that's ultimately the summary of what I'm saying. But in order to be proactive, you need to get your priorities in line first, right? And that priority in line is not just having a clear mind and a good mindset and being able to take an ice bath at 5:30 in the morning. What it actually means is, all of that aside, where do you actually fit in the market? Where do you want to fit in the market? And what is your actual purpose? Your purpose comes from what you've done. Your purpose comes from the experience. What is the gap you want to fill? And if you haven't filled that internally, you're going to really struggle as an entrepreneur with any sort of self-worth. You might be able to make it. I'm not saying you couldn't. You might land on something fantastic, but a lot of times when it comes down to people who end up making it at the end of that journey, which means they had enough discipline to put money away and so on and so forth, it's usually the people that were just entrepreneurial in spirit and maybe led into something, but they made sure that every time you met them, it was the same version of themselves every time. So to me, when I think about being entrepreneurial, that's where I would take that spin, because I don't have a business. I have my own podcast, I have my own LLC, I trademarked it, but I don't care to make money from it, because that was never the intention. If I go 6 months without an episode, I don't care, because it is something that I can use for what I'm currently doing in life that affords me the luxury of taking care of a family on one income, having two children, being able to travel and do everything that would be otherwise the American dream, and something that's not necessarily achievable from our generation, right? Um, but none of that would have come if I didn't have a frame of reference of understanding what I do best, and that's communication and technical competence. That's sales engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah, like like that's really all it is. Like sometimes even being entrepreneurial is leaving the job you have to go get the job you want. Like it doesn't have to be, oh, I have to have a product or I have to have this community that I'm selling. Like fucking Hormozy will always push because he's got 8 million of those things now. Like fucking like literally the king of multi-level marketing schemes. He's absolutely fantastic. I love it, right? But he dove in. He found the need, right? That was his shtick. My shtick was how do I exist as KJ in something that can propel a machine, right?
Yeah,
Because
and I
that
think
satisfied all the things in life. Yeah.
even like with what you said, it sounds like one is priorities, definitely. Which like with that self-awareness, you need to know yourself to know kind
That's
of
what I
what's
mean. The whole
important to you.
context of us getting to that whole like that this blurb is huge because there's no way
Yeah.
I have that conversation without any of the other things that are going on in my life. There's no
Yeah.
way. There's no way.
And I think even like with things that you get good at, I wrote down like you need to care. It has to be something that you actually care about or that you have interest in. Because I think like it's not even just the entrepreneurship, but any kind of skill that you build, which for the most part, once you have the skill, that's what you're gonna get paid for. Um, you have to care to put in like kind of like you have to put in so much time that if you don't have interest in it, there's no way that you will actually build up that skill or do it long enough to build it. Last question I have for you. What is the well, first of all, actually, before I do that, where can people connect with you, learn about you?
Oh yeah. So I'm on. You can find me on the other socials. But if you just search Kyle John Fenton in Google, my LinkedIn pops up. Just find me on LinkedIn. Kyle John Fenton. Everything you need about me is there. You like my little blurb gives you a nice little paragraph of who I am. You can see all my work history that I've had, all of the club. I got my LinkedIn is stacked. You want to see what a good LinkedIn profile is? Go to that profile. But that's where you can find everything. I have my KJ's Corner podcast and my experiences. But that's really where you can connect me. Like I said, you can find me in the other socials, but I'm not active on those at all. Like unless you're in my inner circle, like I'm not reaching out to you on those in any way, shape, or form. But LinkedIn is primarily where I live for sure. Yep. Don't have a
All right.
website. Don't have nothing else to promote. If you want to, talk about anything integration, automation related, but that's once again, I think you're probably going to come to me more from a mindset perspective, and I just happen to have this technical competence in middleware. But if you want to discuss that, I'm literally a SME. I've been doing it my entire
Okay.
career, so I can do anything. Yeah, but that's about it. LinkedIn, where I'd be.
All right. Last question I have for you. What is the impossible you're chasing now?
Actually, it's funny. The impossible I'm chasing now is, and this is gonna sound so like, wow, what a first world problem. I'd like to be able to buy $1 million house.
Nice.
That is the impossible now, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but what's happened is in my career, I'm doing very, very well for myself naturally, right? That, like I said, it's afforded me the luxury of being able to take care of my wife and kids on one income. We have no consumer debt, which is fantastic, right? So we're living that good life, and all that money is being put away for the kids. I mean, we put away tons of money for them, so it's not like we're hoarding it and doing whatever.
Hmm.
Um, so the impossible now is interest rates in the United States are absolutely insane, and it's a capitalist hellscape over here, right?
Mm.
So the market's really in negative, and we'd like to try and move in the next 3 to 5 years. So figuring out ways to maintain our current lifestyle while also putting away enough money to be able to afford the down payment so we can get into that thing is actually like low key. And like I said, I know it sounds so conceited and like, oh, woe is me and blah, blah, blah. But like, it's an impossible task because what I don't want to have happen is make the purchase and then screw up everything we've been doing from a retirement perspective. Like we could retire in our 50s, right? We'd be able to enjoy the kids. We'd be able to, all if we keep everything stable now. And if we make that decision, it could alter the course of what happens down the line. Maybe. I don't know. So the impossible now is being able, because I want to do it outright like traditional. Like I'd love to put down 250, 300 on it, right? And just be able to boom, good. And that's in the house. We have this. We can like would love to be able to do that. I don't know if that's a reality. So that's really the impossible now is the house that we're in our forever house, or do we have the ability to upgrade? Hopefully timing in the market and taking advantage of that will help us. Um, but otherwise, it's as evidenced by that answer, I've achieved everything I thought of and more professionally. I have two awesome kids that you clearly have seen, that you've been able to see, right? Two awesome kids. I have a wife that loves me. I've got family. I have a family that supports me. I have friends that support me. I'm in my hobbies. I've been working out, obviously not these past couple weeks, but literally I'm about to go run a 4 miles today, right? I like when I look at my life holistically, it's really like that everything is really being fulfilled. Like everything's there. So I kind of almost have to give myself these ideas of grandeur to achieve because I truthfully in what I would have perceived to be successful, I've already surpassed that tenfold. So now at this point, it's very much trying to do everything that I possibly can to make sure that those kids can just skyrocket and soar and do what they want. That's really the impossible. But once again, I don't think it's impossible. It's happening in real time, and I'm just trying to enjoy it as much as I possibly can. Yeah,
Yeah. One thing, is that ridiculous? First of all, that's kind of the beauty of. I love to ask these questions, kind of to just hear what are people pursuing,
yeah.
because
That
like
that's that's the pursuit right now. Is that
yeah,
like,
and like so many of us, we have different things that we focus on, and that's just like one of the things that I wanted to say. Like, there's nothing ridiculous about it. That's your dream. That's what you're pursuing, and like you're well on
just
your
say we
path
did it.
to do that.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
say we did it.
and
It's cool. Yeah, and we live there forever. Like that would be the yeah, we're there until
yeah,
there until retirement.
and like it sounds like you're also at the place where it's kind of like you are outgrowing your own identity.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because that's definitely true. Like when you look at most 32-year-olds, they're not haven't been working with financial advisors for years. They don't have a diversified portfolio from an investment perspective. And I literally have a 401k, I have an IRA, I have IULs, I have a broker, like all of these different things, right? Which by the way, if you're listening to this and you don't have any of those, get a term life policy. At least take care of yourself. Get yourself a supplemental disability policy. Not very hard to do. You should do that, especially if you're in the United States of consumerism. All the way, I digress. But it's just more like most people, our generation, didn't necessarily weren't afforded the luxuries to be able to do that. And as a result, I'm kind of adulting very well, right? Like in terms of how we define that, right? So when you say outgrowing it, yeah, I don't really know what else there is to do other than maintain the status quo at this point because the status quo is affording me the life that I want. It's like, isn't that the goal? So now what I'm doing is getting better at drumming. So I always have drumsticks. So I play around with this. I'm trying to just commit to some of those other goals that I had in life, like getting better at bowling, and committing to that. I'd love to go on like the tourney circuit and try to come in last place at whatever. Like I don't care though because
Sure.
it'd be fun, right? But what's really nice is that just professionally around like chasing the impossible I actually have achieved that from a work perspective. And I think I'm very going to be very secure in this industry for a very long time, as evidenced by I got fired and hired within 2 months. Right. So if that's true, now I can commit to the things that made me happy and fulfill that void. So yeah, outgrowing myself for sure. I don't know what this looks like in 10 years. I don't know if I'm working for myself, but all I
Yeah,
do know
because
is
you have never been here. It's like
right.
you have checked off pretty
I've
much all
checked
the
off literally
boxes.
almost every box I could have
Yeah,
possibly
and
thought I
now
would have
it's
ever
like
achieved. Yeah.
it's such an interesting. It's very interesting to be at that place because then it's like, what's next?
And I think what's next is truthfully, like I think when you achieve this, and that's where I think this is where like people say having kids is the best thing ever. Cause
Mm,
now my success can be their success. I can
yeah,
help power what they want to do. Like Maverick's already going through skating, right? Eventually he'll know how to skate. And then eventually he's gonna have a hockey stick. And then eventually we're gonna be traveling and going to games. And it's now I have that fulfillment. So really where I think this is like where I could see an issue is like for these people who don't have children, right? Like what do you what do you do? Where
true.
do you go? Right? So on and so forth. But once again, what worked for me? I filled the space. I filled it with time intentionally. But yeah, I'm just very happy that um it's just one less burden we have to raise our kids, Uh
Yeah,
with all of that. And hopefully it's motivating to y'all. Like you can do it. You can be a small town kid. Just you really got to figure out how to monetize your skills. But monetizing your skills is not selling something per se. Um, it's not any of that. It's what makes people want to talk to you and just blow that up tenfold. And then get banned from LinkedIn like Austria here. And there you go. Just do that. But right, I mean that's chasing the impossible, right? The impossible
yeah.
is actually figuring out who the hell you are and how to market it. Um,
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Because
that's
I
it,
do
man.
think a lot of times we chase the kind of material or external,
Hmm.
but then you achieve it and you're like, who am I? What
I'm
is all this for?
you read it in my LinkedIn. I'm the small town kid who moved to Charlotte, and I just happen to be in a really awesome position for someone who wouldn't have otherwise been there.
Yeah.
That's really who I am in a nutshell. I'm not chasing anything more than that. I love to hear myself talk naturally, right? But people also love to hear me talk. So it's like, okay, like, all right, we got something there, right? But I also, too, to that point, the confidence comes from having something to offer. And I have a lot to offer from an empathy perspective. I have a lot to offer from a financial guidance perspective. I have a lot to offer from a technical perspective, a musical perspective. You won't hear me speaking eloquently on any other topics because that's not my lane. I can have a point of view, but once I figured all of that out, I just doubled and tripled down on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. KJ, thank you
Me
for
too.
coming on.
Me too. Life's good. It really is
It
good.
was
Thank you for
fun.
this.
It was fun.